I sure do appreciate the songs of the saints. There's nothing like that. Vance Havner once said, "What's down in the well will come up in the bucket." And that's kind of the way it is. What a thing to take the pulpit after having sung the praises of the Lord. It's empowering. Well, I would ask you today to open your Bibles with me to Isaiah 24. Place a bookmark there. And then turn to 2 Samuel chapter 23. Isaiah 24 and 2 Samuel 23. In 2 Samuel 23, I want to draw your attention to a verse there, verse 20. And it reads like this: "Then Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man of Kabzeel, who had done mighty deeds, killed the two sons of Ariel of Moab." That must have been a grand thing for him to do. I mean, it got him a spot in the list of David's valiant men. He killed these two champions, Moabite champions. But that's not all. He also went down and killed a lion in the middle of a pit on a snowy day. Have you ever read over that and wondered what's going on right here? Well, you're not alone if that's the question on your mind, because the commentators are everywhere in their speculations, and so I'm going to add my speculation to theirs. I'm going to start a sermon with a speculation. That's what you should never do. The commentators say, well, it was a cave. The lion went into a cave to get out of the snow. Benaiah went into the cave for the same reason, and the confrontation took place. That could be, but I don't really find that satisfying. Then some commentators say, well, it was a cistern, a dried cistern, and the lion either fell in there or he went in there again to escape the snow. Well, that's not really what I believe either. So my speculation is this: that pit was there intentionally because someone dug it to capture a lion. And the lion was in that pit because he got captured there. And the whole intent was to cover over the pit again so that when the enemy comes along, he falls into the pit with this lion. Now, you can imagine what that would do to the morale of the troops. It would make you be very tentative every place you set your foot from there on. Now, I say that's a speculation because we don't have the real reason why all that happened. All we have is that this valiant man, Benaiah, went down in there to kill this thing. Now, I don't know how smart we would say that is, because it seems to me like you could shoot it with arrows from the top. But it seems like Benaiah said something like this: "Here, guys, hold my cloak and watch this." And he climbed down. It says he went down in there. Now, if you encounter a lion in the open field, you've got room to maneuver and move and put some objects between the two of you and win a battle. But when you climb down in a pit, you don't go anywhere. It's a battle to the death. Well, Benaiah won his place in the valiant men category because when he came up out of there and the lion was dead, they said, "Yeah, that'll put you in the top 3, brother." Now, this sermon today is for the purpose of awareness. Beware, awareness. And the topic that I want to bring before you today is snares, traps, and pits. And I use this 2 Samuel 23 verse as a springboard into that sermon. Someone said to be forewarned is to be forearmed. Awareness. Now, there are 3 verses that capture that feeling, and they're in the place I asked you to bookmark, Isaiah 24. We read these words, verse 16, woe to me, alas for me. That's 3 times there. Well, why is that? The treacherous deal treacherously, and the treacherous deal very treacherously. Terror and pit and snare confront you, O inhabitant of the earth. Then it will be that he who flees the report of disaster will fall into the pit, and he who climbs out of the pit will be caught in the snare. The New Testament version of this, Paul's words to Timothy in 2 Timothy 3, verse 1, he said, realize this, that in the last days difficult times will come. Now, the word difficult in the NAS, in my opinion, is not strong enough, because the Strong's says dangerous, fierce, and perilous. In the last day, that's what the times are going to be like, Paul's telling Timothy. And the very next verse, he starts into a list of why the days are like that. He starts describing the characteristics of men during that time. He says in verse 4, treacherous. Men will be treacherous and reckless. And the word treacherous means a betrayer, a traitor, a trap. So when we talk about snares, pits, and traps, the first heading that I want to speak on is the nature of snares, traps, and pits. And 3 ideas or feelings that accompany this imagery of a trap, that's what it is, it's Bible imagery, are these. 1, it's those who were not expecting it, that the trap captured. Have you ever said, I didn't see that coming? No one walks deliberately into a trap. So that's the first one. The second one, there's virtually no chance of escape once the animal is trapped, because that's the whole design of the trap, is to hold its prey. And thirdly, because the trap itself is camouflaged, what initially appeared to be harmless resulted in the entrapment of the animal and, by extension, death. So those 3 things add a lot of feeling to this idea of traps and snares and pits. It's those who are not expecting it, and there's no chance of escape once they're trapped, and it's camouflaged so things don't always appear as they really are. Well, traps, the nature of snares, traps, and pits. 1, they're set by someone. Someone does that. They're conceived, they're arranged, they're executed by someone. And it's part of this big, epic conflict of good and evil in the world, God and Satan, the children of God and the children of the devil. And there's great potential for entrapment. No place is safe. That verse in Isaiah 24 right there, the treacherous deal very treacherously. And those that flee the report of disaster fall into the pit, and he who climbs out of the pit's caught in the snare. There's no place that's safe. Now, Satan in the Bible is depicted as a lion for his strength, a serpent for his subtlety, and a dragon for his fierceness. And he's aided by followers that are multitudes, legions, his minions, his agents, his pawns, those that are duped by the devil. Paul talks about that in the second letter to Timothy about those that are ensnared by the devil after being captured by him to do his will, and they don't even know it. They need to come to their senses. So traps are set by someone. That's the first point. You remember, even our Lord experienced that. The Pharisees went out and plotted together how they might trap him in what he said. A trap. Satan entered into Judas in the upper room, and what did Judas go and do? He set a trap to take the Lord into custody in the middle of the night when crowds weren't around. It was a trap. Paul said that there is an advantage that can be taken of us, and we needed to be careful because we're not ignorant of his schemes. So traps are set by someone. Secondly, they're baited. Amos asked this rhetorical question. He said, does a bird fall into a trap on the ground when there's no bait in it? They're baited intentionally. The prey is lured in by an overwhelming desire, either for pleasure, for profit, for some advantage, and it's all according to the tastes and the habits of the individual. It's arranged that way. Baited traps. I have two neighbors that live to the back of me, and they decided they were going to get Japanese beetle traps and put them in their yard. And so they each had a couple of Japanese beetle traps. Now those Japanese beetle traps have one little pellet of bait in there, in that trap, and it's amazing how many beetles they catch. They were hauling out 5-gallon buckets of beetles every day, and I was rejoicing because there were no beetles in my yard. They all went over there. All the beetles looking for love went to their house and got caught in the traps. They're baited, you see. But you know what? There was not one honeybee ever found in that. So what is for you a bait, a lure, a temptation, may not be for me. Someone said Satan knows his birds well and he knows how to catch them. So traps are baited. Someone sets them, traps are baited. Traps are also hidden. Our pit with the lion in it, covered over in that imagery, it's hidden. There's an element of subtlety, of craftiness, camouflage. When we first moved to Sedalia, I set about making some islands in my yard and planting flowers in there, and the bunnies were very happy I moved into the neighborhood because they were eating my flowers all over. And so I borrowed a live trap. My thought was I'm going to catch this rabbit and relocate it out into the woods. And so I set the trap and I put the bait in there. It was the best carrot I could find. And I camouflaged it. I put evergreens all around it and things like that. You know, I never caught a rabbit. They're more wily than I think. But my point is, someone said it, it's baited, and it's camouflaged. Satan is much better at that than I am. We're told the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety. And the Genesis account says, when the woman saw the tree was good for food, and it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, she took from its fruit and ate. And she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. Paul says the woman being deceived fell into transgression, the idea of falling into a pit. And has there been any greater pitfall than that one? That was at the very beginning. So here the trap was. It was deliberately set by the devil, the serpent. It was baited. The food looked good. Was a delight to the eyes, and it was camouflaged. It had the appearance of being beneficial. It'll make you wise. The whole thing. And as a result of that one trap, the whole world is plunged into sin and misery. The wise man of Proverbs says it's useless to spread the baited net in the sight of any bird. If it's not hidden, it's a waste of time. David said they talk of laying snares secretly, and they say, who can see them? He also said, the proud have hidden a trap for me in cords, and they spread a net by the wayside, and they set snares for me. So traps are set by someone, they're baited, they're hidden. And they always involve a deliberate deception. The use of decoys. Some of you might hunt ducks and use decoys. There's a deliberate act of deception in there. I'll pray for you. There are false brethren, wolves dressed like sheep. In fact, Paul said in that catalog of dangers, 2 Corinthians 11, one of the dangers was from false brethren. Implants of the enemy, ambushes. Things are not always what they seem. In the spring of 1535, a man named Henry Phillips arrived in Antwerp, Belgium, where Tyndale had been hiding. Tyndale, you know, he was the one responsible for the translation of our English Bible. And having learned of the failure to arrest Tyndale, Phillips took it upon himself to betray Tyndale in hopes of gaining notoriety and financial reward. By the end of May, Henry Phillips had made contact with Tyndale and obtained his confidence, noting that Tyndale was, quote, simple and not expert in the wily subtleties of this world. Before Tyndale knew what was taking place, Phillips had set an ambush for his newfound friend, and 2 English spies made the arrest. And before the story is all said and done, Tyndale is strangled and burned at the stake. A trap, betrayers, deception. They're hidden. Well, traps are suddenly sprung. Ecclesiastes 9:12 says, like fish caught in a treacherous net and birds trapped in a snare, so the sons of men are ensnared at a treacherous, evil time when it suddenly falls on them. Traps spring suddenly. They often spring from a dangerous familiarity with evil. The story's told of my great-grandfather who wanted to hunt crows. Any of you ever tried to hunt crows? Those creatures are hard to shoot because they have really good eyesight, and they always post a couple of sentries up in the trees to warn the crows that are on the ground whenever something comes along. And so he wanted to shoot a crow out of the back door of his house. Every time he would open the back door, they would see it and fly. Well, he came up with the idea that he would just continue to open the back door, and gradually they would get used to it. Then he opened the back door a little crack and stuck a broomstick out, and they would fly. And then eventually they got used to the broomstick sticking out through the crack of the open door. And of course, you know where I'm going with this. Then it wasn't a broomstick, it was a rifle barrel. And he got his crow. And so there's a dangerous familiarity there with evil. We get comfortable. We're setting ourselves up for a trap. Traps are often fatal for the prey. Satan is no believer in catch and release. David said, they seek my life and lay snares for me. Well, these are some of the nature of traps and snares and pits. How about some examples? And I'll try to move through these fairly quickly because It's amazing how many of them there are in the Bible. A man who flatters his neighbor, what is he doing? Spreading a net for his steps. There's dangerous curiosity. Moses warned the Israelites, beware that you're not ensnared to follow them, and do not inquire after their gods, saying, how do these nations serve their gods, that I also may do likewise? In other words, don't even go there if you're curious. Dangerous associations. Joshua warned in chapter 23, if you ever go back and cling to the rest of these nations which remain among you and intermarry with them, so that you associate with them and they with you, they will be a snare and a trap to you. And you know, that was a continual failure on the part of Israel all throughout their entire existence. That very thing right there. The adulteress. Ecclesiastes 7:26, he describes her this way. More bitter than death, the woman whose heart is snares and nets, and whose hands are chains. One who is pleasing to God will escape from her, but the sinner will be captured by her. A trap. The adulteress hunts for the precious life. And then in another place, he describes the simple one that follows her as an ox goes to the slaughter and as a stag is caught in a trap, until an arrow pierces through his liver, as a bird hastens to the snare. All of this is describing the adulteress. So he does not know that it will cost him his life. The mouth of an adulteress is a deep pit. He who's cursed of the Lord will fall into it. Their rash commitments. It's a snare to say rashly it's holy and then reflect only after having made the vow. It's a snare. Rash commitments. Covetousness. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a snare. We know that one, don't we? And many foolish and harmful desires which plunge men into ruin and destruction. There are times of overwhelming misfortune and sorrow and grief and loss that leave us vulnerable for traps. We're tempted to think poorly of God's providence. You remember Satan's design for Job? He will curse you to your face. That was his design. Entanglements. We're warned about being entangled in the affairs of everyday life. That's a net of our own doing there. The fear of man brings a snare. The fear of man became a snare, and the disciples fled and left Jesus alone, and Peter denied that he even knew him at all 3 times. The fear of man. Fearing what others will do to us, caring too much about what others say or think of us. Both of those cloud our judgment and influence our decisions. Even death itself can spring suddenly like an unexpected trap. People aren't ready to die. Jesus warned of that in Luke 21 and verse 34. He said, be on guard, that's beware, so that your hearts will not be weighed down with dissipation, that's loose living, drunkenness, that's indulgence, and the worries of life, that's distraction. And that day will not come on you suddenly like a trap. So death comes suddenly when you're unprepared for it. Well, we've seen something of the nature of traps. We've seen a few examples of them, traps, pits, and snares. Lastly, the avoidance of traps, pits, and snares. I have just some suggestions here. The first is recognize God from whom nothing is hidden. I mean, if our only help is human ability, without a doubt we'll be taken. You can't be discerning enough to escape. David said, "You take me out of the net they have hidden for me, for you are my refuge." It's God. Blessed be the Lord, Psalm 124. We've escaped like a bird from the snare of the fowler. The snare has been broken, and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of our savvy ability to sniff out the trap. No, our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. Recognize the Lord. Secondly, submit to every urge to pray. It seems that God gives a spirit, oftentimes a spirit of prayer in the face of danger. Pray continually for exposure of snares before becoming entrapped. Pray for a discerning spirit. David did. He prayed this prayer in Psalm 141 and verse 9. He said, "Keep me from the jaws of the trap which they have set for me, and from the snares of those who do iniquity, and let the wicked fall into their own nets while I pass safely by." That's an amazing prayer. That could be mine, yours. Their plot became known to Saul. They were waiting for him at the gate day and night. And because their plot became known, he was let out of the window in a basket in the middle of the night and escaped. We should pray that the plots would become known. God, in his kind providence, on another occasion, Paul's nephew heard of their ambush and went and told Paul. That's providence. We should pray for that kind of providence. That was that group of assassins that swore they weren't going to eat and drink until they killed Paul, and I guess they all starved. Providentially, that happened. Paul's nephew heard of their ambush. Don't be naive or unsuspecting. The unsuspecting hearts are the ones that get deceived, according to Romans 16:8, by the smooth and flattering speech. And we're not ignorant of his schemes. I already said that one. In times of vulnerability, expect a trap. The devil, after all, he is an opportunist. David said, "When my spirit faints within me, you know my way. In the path where I walk, they have hidden a trap for me." When his spirit fainted within him. And he also said, "They set a net for my steps. My soul was bowed down, and they dug a pit in my way." So in times of extreme vulnerability, expect the devil to take advantage of that, traps to be set. Don't trust your own personal judgment alone. Seek counsel, because we lose objectivity in emotionally charged situations. Here is maybe some of the best advice I could give or suggestion tonight, and that is, keep your distance. The surest way to not fall into a pit is to stay away from the edge of it altogether. That temptress spoken of in Proverbs 5, keep your way far from her. Do not go near the door of her house. Do not stray into her paths, nor let her capture you with her eyelids. That temptress at the office, in the gym, on the computer, it's all the same. The temptress. Stay away from the edge of the pit. Someone said a fish is not free while a hook is in its mouth. And that's no matter how much line it pulls off, as long as that hook is in the mouth. But if it casts that hook out, shakes that hook out, it's free. Someone else said a horse escaped with a halter is easily caught again. So we've got to keep our distance, avoid falling into the pit, and stay away from the edge of it. Now, I would like to close just with one anecdote from the life of John G. Peyton. You know, he was the missionary to the South Seas islands inhabited by cannibals. I read this: John G. Peyton kept several goats as a source of milk supply. And one day he heard a desperate bleating among his goats as if they were being killed or tortured. And he rushed to the goat house, and instantly a band of armed cannibals sprang from the bush, surrounded him, and raised their clubs. He had fallen into their trap. "You have escaped from us many times," they said, "but now we're going to kill you." Lifting his hands and eyes toward heaven, Peyton committed his cause to the Lord, whose servant he was. And as he prayed, the divine presence overshadowed him. His heart was filled with a tender reassurance, and the cannibals slipped away one after the other. And Peyton is quoted as saying this: "Thus Jesus restrained them once again. His promise is a reality. He's with his servants to support and bless them even to the end of the world." That's our hope right there, of escaping all of these traps and pits and snares that the enemy has for us. So may the Lord give us help in all of that.